myself for 5 minutes. The gentleman says he's baffled by we're moving legislation or considering legislation that would induce or increase leveraging. I don't know any of the legislation that this panel has just discussed here today does anything with regard to leverage. Secondly, the gentleman speaks to the fact that we're trying to undo some of the legislation dealing with the underlying causes of what brought us to the...
By redefining, will the gentleman yield?
Yield, let me just finish this thought.
Sure.
The causes of it, and I don't know that any panel that we've had over the last year and a half said that part of the cause of the problems that we went into was a lack of data compilation with regard to salaries, nor was it anything to do with the interconnectedness of private equity funds. So those were not the causes. Those are just the elements that are now with the additional burden that we're placing on to industry and the capital markets that are preventing the very same jobs that I think everyone on this panel would like to see brought to fruition. Did the gentleman have just a...
Right. Just in looking at the way we are redefining major swap participants, we are allowing entities that do not have the underlying capital as Dodd-Frank would require. Yeah, and so those folks would be included and be able, that would be an inducement to that type of activity for firms that don't have the underlying capital. You'll have more of that. That's why I'm saying it increases leverage.
Reclaiming my time, and I'm reminded that provision has already been addressed by this House and has passed this House by over 300 bipartisan votes previously.
Well, so why did we redefine it here then? Well, it's also in law, and the House and Senate passed it, and the President signed it.
I did not yield the remaining time.
I'm sorry.
So with my remaining time, Mr. Zabrod, I see in your testimony that you're requesting legislative extension of Dodd-Frank with regard to the derivatives. Can you with regard to rulemaking, can you very quickly talk to us how much time is necessary in order to get this thing right?
I think the Coalition for Derivatives End Users hasn't formally put forward a proposed time request, but I think it is essentially critical that as we regulate this very large market for the first time, that regulators have sufficient time to write thoughtful rules.
Thank you. And you also mentioned other changes to legislative fixes that the coalition has looked to. You talked about real-time reporting being one, I guess capital considerations with regard to Basel, creating margin requirements, of course, by the end users, I guess, be one specific one you need. Anything other than those?
We've written over 100 pages of comment letters to
For legislative fixes?
On regulatory matters. For now, the items that we're focused on receiving some legislative clarification include the clarification that margin shall not be applicable to end-user transactions.
So that's the main one.
And the implementation date.
Okay. Mr. Silvers, you came up with a couple different names for these bills. The Business Risk Mitigation and Price Stabilization Action should be called the Help Create Another AIG Act. But, you know, if you look at the legislation that is drafted out there, any reading of it, and when you consider them under the Murphy Amendment that passed the House, as I said before, with wide bipartisan support, how would anyone take that to read that it would not capture an AIG situation again? Well, it didn't capture it last time with the regulators, but why would it not capture it with that definition as we have presented?
There are, in Dodd-Frank, in addition to those capital requirements that obviously fall under, that banks fall under through the normal banking system, there are two categories of swaps of actors in the derivatives market under Dodd-Frank. One category is what you call a dealer, swaps dealer. The other category is a major swaps participant. Mm-hmm. The full definitions of both categories are being worked out through regulation at the moment. But the difference between the two fundamentally is the notion of a dealer is somebody who is basically working to would appear to be somebody working to maintain a balanced book. A major swaps participant would be someone likely to be taking risk. They'd be taking one side of a particular position. What AIG was doing was taking one side of a particular position. They were not a dealer. I mean, they sometimes referred themselves as a dealer, but that's not what they were. They were taking the risk without the other side.
I understand what they were doing.
In a whole set of derivatives.
So you would say they would not be captured by this definition?
while it's always conceivable that the regulators could write their definition of a dealer in such a way as to capture parties that are taking a major position in one direction, it doesn't seem the obvious way one would envision a dealer.
Mr. Zabrod, do you have a comment on that? And then I'll close on that.
That's your risk right there.
I understand your perspective.
AIG had a $2 trillion book of derivatives. I think the bill that this House passed and the bill that the Senate passed, each of them would very clearly encompass AIG in its major swap participant definition.
There's no way that you could squeak out of this, and however the regulators put it.
A $2 trillion derivatives book is not a needle in a haystack.
But you're gutting that provision.
Thank you.